Well, it's like Adele once said, hello, it's me. And hello from the other side of this car. This car right here is my 1998 Porsche Boxster base model. Today we are going to fix a relatively common issue that these Boxsters and 996 Carreras can experience, and that is a particular issue with the starter motor. We'll talk about it, we'll talk about what causes it, and we'll talk about how to fix it. Gotta crack the pamplemousse and get to working. Let's do it.
Pull back, drop in, and just smack the
All right, now when I say common issue, I don't necessarily mean that this is an issue that happens across the board to every single Boxster. This thing has, from what I can tell, the original starter motor in it, and it has almost 110,000 miles on the odometer. So, natch, with age, the starter motor is going to start to go bad because that thing sits in the engine room that just holds all of the air, the hot air in it, and it heat cycles 8 gigabajillion times. Now, what happens when the starter motor starts to fail is a couple of symptoms. Let me show you, actually let me see if I can recreate one of those symptoms now. Actually, if we're lucky, we might be able to recreate both of them. Unfortunately, we're only able to recreate one of the two symptoms. We'll talk about them both, but the one of the two symptoms was that god-awful sound that you heard right after the engine started.
The ripping and the tearing.
So, to explain that, let's talk about the anatomy of a starter motor really quick.
Mr. Bottom Massage Machine, go!
All right, so right here, this is the starter motor for a 986 Boxster. You can tell because of the way it is.
Wow.
So, quite a convoluted looking little unit here. Let me explain kind of what's going on. So we've got the actual motor part. This is all of the electronic wire windings and everything that make up the actual motor that spins over your engine. We've got this right here, which is the starter motor gear. And then within that, there is what's called the bendix, which is the thing that reaches out to connect with your flywheel to allow this gear to mate up with it and then spin your flywheel, which then spins your engine. And there's this right here, which is the starter motor solenoid. Basically what happens is once electrical current goes across this bad unit, it shoves over to create contact within the motor here to then let the power flow through your starter motor and therefore turn your engine. So, three main kind of parts make up the anatomy of this. So the question is, what was that god-awful sound? Well, that had to do with this right here, the bendix and the starter motor gear. The purpose of the bendix is to not only mesh this gear up with the flywheel, but the moment that the engine actually kicks over, it will then pull back this gear so that it will prevent exactly what's going on right now. What was happening is on an older starter motor, your bendix gets a little bound up. It shoots the gear out to mesh the gear up with your flywheel, and then once the engine kicks, it goes from 200-ish, 250 RPMs, call it, up to 1200 RPMs right after firing. And when the bendix gets a little mushy, gets a little bit bound up, then your starter motor gear is still connected. And yeah, you guessed it. When the gear is spinning super fast like that, once the engine goes from 250 RPMs up to 1200 RPMs and this gear is still connected, you can imagine this tiny little gear is spinning real quick. And that is not supposed to happen. So that's one symptom. The other symptom is that the motor itself in this starter motor is starting to go bad. Now, obviously, this was a cold start just now. I hadn't started the car in probably a couple days, so we didn't experience the second symptom, which was slow crank. What happens is, and my good buddy Mr. Print can attest to this, when you're running errands and you heat cycle your starter motor, you get a lot of heat built up in your engine room. Next thing you know, you have soaked this starter motor down. An aging starter motor with all those windings and everything, they start to kind of swell a little bit. And what happens is they kind of get bound up internally and they can't connect as well as they once did because all those contacts just are a little bit worn. So when you get a starter motor heat soaked, it doesn't crank well at all. You get a slow crank condition and eventually you'll get it to where it just doesn't really crank much at all and you're not going to fire your engine off and you'll get stranded. So that is symptom number 2. And that's exactly the reason actually why this says do not strike with hammer, because that's actually a common, very short-term fix. Whenever a starter motor is bound up, you hit it with a hammer and that can possibly loosen it up enough to allow it to spin to get you one more engine start. So we've got a starter problem. We need to go ahead and swap this puppy out. Let's go ahead and talk about how to do that. Okay, well, as you can see, I just went ahead and threw this bad girl into service position so that we can gain access to the top side of our engine here, which is exactly all we're gonna need to be able to swap out the starter. Asterisk. We are also going to need to obviously remove a lot of stuff out of the way. We'll talk about that in just 1 second, but in the meantime, I do also want to mention that I did go ahead and disconnect the battery. That is very essential, especially with regards to work on the starter motor, because all of the battery's power goes to the starter motor. That is the biggest single largest draw, electrical draw on the car. So obviously you really don't want to mess up and ground out the battery on accident, because you'll send yourself through the back wall. You know what I'm talking about? Let me go ahead and show you where this starter motor is and talk about what we're gonna have to remove to gain access to this puppy. All right, now standing on the passenger side of the car, looking down into our engine bay here, you can see the starter motor. Do you see the starter motor? Yep. If you guess that it's right there, you're exactly right. But obviously there's a bunch of crap on top of it preventing us from getting any good access to it. Yeah, it is all the way down there. You can see that starter motor solenoid kind of poking its way out on top there. Yep, right there. That's it. So we're gonna need to remove all of this stuff. What are we gonna have to pull out? Well, we have to take off this intake tube. We've got to take off this PCV pipe here. We've got to take off our throttle body so that we can then swing this intake plenum up. Actually, we might just end up removing this altogether. Once those things are out of the way, we should have really, really solid access to the V, or the flat part of the engine, and that therefore will give us perfect access to our starter. So I'm gonna go ahead and start flipping the Tortuga, or whatever the heck the kids are saying, and get all of this stuff removed so that we can go ahead and swap out that starter motor. Do I regret not racking this car? Yeah, my back is already kind of barking at me for not doing that and having this thing a little more up in my teeth. We might end up doing that. We might end up doing that. Ask me in about 20 minutes. We'll see. So as you can see in this area, well, we've got the entire intake plenum missing. That's because we took it all out. So we had to remove the intake tube off throttle body, disconnect the purge line off of the lower part of the throttle body. There are 2 sensors going to the throttle body that needed to be disconnected. And then of course, loosen up your hose clamps on the plenums in order to get those puppies disconnected. Pretty easy peasy there, it just requires some wrestling. Now, I did also go ahead and remove our dipstick tube and our oil fill tube just to be able to gain a little bit better access to the lower bolt for the starter motor that's way, way down there, just in the name of gaining a little bit of extra access. Once those were out of the way, we went ahead and disconnected the 2 main wires going to the back of the starter motor, and then loosened up the 2 main bolts holding it into that bracket. So as you can see, obviously nothing too terribly, insanely difficult, just a little bit of patience required to be able to get all that stuff out of the way. Now, was it absolutely necessary to remove the dipstick and oil fill tube and the plenum and the throttle body? Not really, but I'm always somebody who will opt to do that little bit of extra work to save myself a lot of trouble down the line, because it's such a pain in the butt if you try to work around all of that stuff and you have zero access to the stuff you're trying to get access to, and you're working in a teeny tiny itty bitty little spot. It's just a pain in the butt. So I always like to take the extra 5-10 minutes to get stuff out of the way, get really, really nice access. That way you're like, oh my gosh, this is a breeze to work on. So we've got the old starter motor out. Let's go ahead and get that new one in. I'm pretty eager to go ahead and see how the new one performs. All right, just double checking to make sure we got everything connected up. I think we do. Let's go ahead and see what this thing sounds like as she's cranking. Oh my gosh. Did you guys hear that?
Did you hear that?
Holy cow. This thing is transformed. Oh my gosh, that was night and freaking day. Even earlier, you know how I said we didn't see the symptom of the slow crank? Well, compared to that, what we saw earlier was a freaking slow crank. That was awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and say we fixed it. Well, all right, folks, and there you have it. Short and sweet video today, but as you can see, a very satisfying one. So if you found this video helpful, or at the very least entertaining, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button, and please subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell notification while you're at it. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Yes, you, I'm looking right at you, and I will see you all hopefully in the next video. See ya.
Pull back. Drop in and just smack the lip. Bah!
Mr. Body Massage Machine. Gone.
What the hell?
Body massage.
G.I.